Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta. Welcome back to Dolly's World. I'm at Earth Song Studio in Metuchen, New Jersey, and with me is a very special lady. Her name, Linda Vonderschmidt-LaStella. Let's meet her. Linda, were you a kid who worked in mud and shaped mud and sand and
Actually,
things
no.
like this? No?
No. I was a very prissy kid growing up. I like to draw. I really like to draw. But as far as liking to play in mud, no, I like to construct things. But I really wasn't into being messy and muddy.
Then how did you get into clay? Because there is nothing messier or muddier than clay.
Absolutely, that's true. Well, it's an interesting story. I was taking classes to get my degree, my first degree in art. And as a result, you need to take a whole variety of classes in different areas. And so I went through the painting class and the drawing class. And, you know, in those, everyone sat hidden behind their easels. That was my experience anyway. They sat hidden behind their easels, never looking left or right, never speaking to anyone. When I got to the ceramics class, which was the first time I had ever touched clay, it was a matter of everybody chatting, everybody needed to work together. And there's something about that social community aspect.
It's an encounter
of the
group,
process.
as I said to you before.
Absolutely.
It's taking out one's aggression.
Well, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of physicality in it. And because it is so involved in so many steps, very often there are communities of people who work together to make the process really happen. So I guess it really was the community aspect of it that really appealed to me. And then somehow my hands just knew that it was the mode for me.
This was it.
Yeah,
This
it
was for you.
It was. The first time I touched it, I knew it was. Yeah.
What did you start with, though? What kind of pieces did you start with?
Well, as with anyone, starting with Clay 101, you began making in the 3 ways that you hand build.
Don't tell me you made ashtrays.
Did not make ashtrays. Did not make ashtrays. Pinch, coil, and slab. And interestingly, one of the first things that I did was a series of trees. And trees are an image that I use over and over again and continue to use. Yeah. So, yeah, they were pinch, coil, and slab. And I did my requisite pinch, coil, and slab things.
But then you went on to doing other types. What inspired you to do these other types?
Well, again, when I moved to Catholic University for my master's, to study for my master's in ceramics, I took also a lot of painting classes. And doing those 2 together, and my primary professor, the person who was directing me through my master's, was basically a 2-dimensional person, because you can, get anyone from any discipline. And as it evolved, I found that developing clay tiles really pulled things together for me. And as I was moving toward my thesis, we had about a 6-foot by 6-foot work table in the studio. And one day I said to my ceramics professor, I'd like to make a piece this big as this table. Well, he was like, oh my goodness, Linda. And he went around measuring and he said, we're talking about 600 pounds of clay here. So very quickly he said if I was going to do such a thing, when I could do it so that I wouldn't tie up the entire lab and how it would be done. So basically I had to come in over the Christmas vacation and do it because it was going to be my master's thesis and lay out these 600 pounds of clay.
That is a lot of clay.
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. I've done 2,000-pound pieces at this point.
By the time this airs, we will be in September. And of course, the notorious 9/11 anniversary will be.
Yes.
But you have some pieces that 9/11 inspired you for, don't you? They're called the Veiled Women.
Yes. It was out of the 9/11 experience and beyond, really. What we began to become aware of, what the women in Afghanistan were going through, out of the whole of what our world is, kind of in turmoil about. And hearing the stories, I listen to NPR in the studio, and every evening hearing the stories about those women. I decided that for a one-person exhibit that I had at the beginning of last year, I would do a series which I eventually called The Veiled Women. And basically it was 12-inch by 12-inch base tiles covered with a very thin, pierced layer on top. Each of those has some image of woman underneath on the base tile. Some are very realistic images of faces. Some are very abstract images of faces. Some are purely symbolic. With the veiling in front, with an attempt to create the sense of frustration of both looking out and looking in. As I showed those pieces, however, some women began in conversation about the fact that they represented to them not only the stance of the women in Afghanistan, but the reality that women all over the world, through many religions, through many time periods, have been veiled, have experienced a veiling, and that there is both a goodness and, in a sense, an evilness to that. And it's the interesting aspect of both of those, that there is something to that allowing the person, or acknowledging the person's own wholeness in and of itself, her relationship to herself and her maker, that veiling allows, that veiling speaks to. Certainly there's something in that to the Jewish skull cap. There's something in that to Catholic religious women who wear veils. That sense of an integrity, and I am complete in myself. So, that dialogue, that reflection is what I'm hoping those pieces, as they begin to be more exhibited, those pieces allow people to enter into.
I read in a press release of yours, and one always should be careful of press releases, what one reads, that you considered clay is a primal entity. And I thought about that, and that goes back to what I was saying before about a large encounter group. But it's like baking bread.
Well, I feel...
You can pound.
Yes, yes.
There's a sense in, okay, this bugs me today. So I have friends who make bread. And this is very much like it.
Well, what I believe is that today in our society, in contemporary America, we are a very heady people. So much depends on and comes out of pure thinking processes. We really don't use and acknowledge the whole of our being, which includes our bodies.
We don't feel.
Right, and that's part of it. So the very physicality that clay demands, that clay requires, the pressing it, when someone who's never worked in clay comes to me and they press into clay for the first time, very often there are wild giggles, there's explosions of laughter, no matter what age group I'm working with, no matter what kind of a composite the group is, because it's getting so in touch with themselves, which in many instances they've never been in touch with. So yes, it is a primal entity, and I see it as something that if we all have a sense of creativity at the heart of our being, but somehow clay touches us into more than just the creative aspect. It's something that's really strongly related to who we are as people, who we are as a whole person. And so there's a quote by a woman potter named M.C. Richards. She just died, maybe last year. She wrote a wonderful book called Centering in Poetry, Pottery, and the Person. And a line which I use of hers, which I think is just wonderful and speaks about this whole experience, is the most beautiful thing the potter makes is the potter. And so when I go into the studio, I need to maintain that spirit of coming fresh to the clay. I mean, every artist needs to come fresh to his or her work.
Well, sure. If you've done, and I know you do, because we're going down into your workshops, in which I'm excited about and watch this process somewhat, but you had a lot of monks. They look like monks.
Yes.
They were monks. And you figure, okay, I got an order for 200 monks. How can I get excited about the 200th
That's right.
monk? It's very similar to performing on stage, where you've done 1,000 shows.
That's right.
And you come out that day and you say, oh, I have another one of these to do.
Yeah.
But that is a fresh audience.
That's
so you
right.
must give them a fresh performance.
Exactly, and that's a good connection. Yeah, that's one I hadn't thought of, and yeah, I'm grateful to hear that, because it does, you know, when you've got an order for however many, and I don't use molds, you know, each one is really an original creation.
Linda, we're down in your studio, which I must say is not only adorable, but it's cool and comfortable after being outside.
Right.
But we're going to talk about some of the processing that you have to go through with your work. And you said you had a work that you had to do, and I promise you, I will touch nothing.
Yeah.
Then my friends know, don't let her touch anything. This was a baptismal font, right?
That's right, that's right.
And they asked you to reproduce another one.
That's right. Yes, they had a large, as you can see, copper bowl that really the inside was badly stained and
Right.
marked, and it didn't really befit the ritual that
Right.
it symbolized. So they said, can you do a ceramic one? And I said, of course. So as you can see, it needs to stay wrapped, a really large piece
Right,
like
because
this.
that's part of it, to keep the clay damp.
That's right. It needs to dry very slowly. Basically, what I did was turn the bowl over and do a drape mold. Use that bowl as a drape mold and just drape
me turn
a
this over.
half
No,
inch.
it's heavy.
Yeah, you can.
All
I
right,
can do that.
I was going to, all right.
That's it. Yeah. And I
Okay.
placed a cloth
So you
over
put
top
there,
of it.
yeah.
And then draped clay. As I was working, I said, I wonder how much clay I actually need to use for this. So you've constantly got to figure things out here. So I wound up taking a
Oh, this
string.
is highly technical.
Yes.
I can see
Oh,
this.
highly technical. Take a string,
Yeah.
measure, and
Yeah.
then get my circumference, because basically I was starting with a flat slab of clay.
Right.
But that gave me a good sense I could get it in its entirety, and then basically two of us laid that over, because it was roughly 50 pounds of clay
I was
that I
just going
started
to
with.
ask how many pounds of clay
Yeah,
it is.
roughly that. It's a half-inch thick, and you know, I started with that. Let it dry a little bit, because with clay, in the process, it shrinks. So, and about 10%. So it was on the outside of the bowl, so it was larger than the space. And interestingly, at that size, it would not fit in my kiln. It was larger than the diameter of my kiln. So I was counting on that reality of it shrinking in order to even fit in the kiln, in the diameter. After a bit, it stiffened and it did start shrinking. Again, two of us were able to lift it off, re-flip the bowl, and then with the cloth insert the clay piece into the bowl so that it only
would
went in
mold.
like up to here.
Right, so it would mold the bottom.
Well,
so to
it
speak.
would at least give a sense of stability to it, because the clay at that point was still very workable.
And it
then
moves.
That's right. And I could work the interior, which is really the only part that's going to show, because it's going to be inserted into a wooden piece. And basically, I just did some etching of, you know, kind of concentric circles, wave-like imagery, and it's going to be all rich blues and whites and give a sense of water for the ritual that it's used for.
Now, eventually, this does crack, and you had a fascinating way of fixing these little tiny
Yes, well,
cracks.
there was a little crack starting, and I said, especially at this point, that's really not problematic because I have a dish of what is basically paper clay, a little bit of paper. Toilet tissue actually is what it is.
Which is also high-tech.
Oh, very high-tech. And mixed with the same kind of clay. This is a medium fire stoneware clay body, which means it matures at a temperature of probably 2200 degrees. To fix that crack with some of that, the crack will disappear and heal nicely. However, the top, the rim, which will dry much more quickly, does have to be kept covered in order to maintain a nice even drying.
When we put it back as old
Yeah,
plastic.
it's dry enough at the bottom that, you know, that can be left open. And down here, this is a nice damp place, so, you know, if I were to put it out in the sun and the air, the whole thing would crack up.
Tell me something. How long do you have to fire that once
Well-
it's dry?
Well,
How long does it
the
take?
firing process is one that is slow up and slow down. Because again, you're talking about very vast changes of temperature, and you're talking about chemical changes in the clay. So for a piece like this, it would probably take, close to 12 hours
Wow.
to actually have the fire going. Then the kiln will remain closed probably for another 12. So you're talking a full day at least.
When you add the clay to the color to the clay, then do you have to fire it again or no?
Well, I can do either thing.
One gives it a shiny
that's
glaze
right, a
if you
shiny
fire it. Oh,
surface.
see,
That's
I
right, so
remember
you know.
from my old days.
That's it. Sometimes, much of my work, I do glaze right on the greenware. In other words, when the clay is at this temperature or this dryness, this is pretty much leather hard. If you feel it, it's still cool to the touch, which means
Yeah.
it's not really dry. I could glaze that and just do a one shot. But with this, something this size, I'm not going to do
Well,
that.
it's
I'm gonna
also
bisque it.
something extra, extra, extra special. It's
Right.
going into a church.
Well, it's
and,
extra special, plus it's extra large, you
Yeah.
know, and I look upon every piece as extra special, but the size in this instance is really going to determine how I'll deal with the firing. I can do something equally special, but, you know, maybe the dimensions or maybe it needs to be cut up, and
Right.
I can do that, you know, as a one fire.
Now, what I'd like to do before our time does run out,
Yes.
these are your pieces. Now, these are, let's go from when you get people to smash this.
Oh,
for
yes.
you.
All right. Well,
Okay, the raw piece before
I do.
this. This is fascinating.
I do have folks who assist me, who
I
work,
love this. I
work
really
with
do.
me as studio assistants, and I really try to think of ways that will make it easy for me because I work as a one-person artist, and I need to find ways that people can really assist. So earlier this summer, I had
She
someone...
goes back to the local encounter group.
That's right, that's right. Actually, this is my husband. Periodically, he comes down in pounds.
Same difference.
Basically, we use paddles. I had a carpenter in the area make me a whole series of them. I've got them in different sizes, and they're really helpful. They're really handy. And to get the piece of clay paddled so that it really is air-free, it really is a
Is that the trick? Is to getting all the air out of
That
it?
is the trick, to get it really a compressed piece. There is this business of centering in clay, and that's what I would talk about as the centering for a piece like this, where one person has talked about it as where the center meets the edges. Then your clay is ready to work with.
Okay.
So the center has met my edges here, and then that person just wet it a little bit, wrapped it tight with plastic, and I've had them sitting there for a month or so until I've been ready to begin working with them.
So
And
then the next process, that's our beginning process.
That's right. And then I begin I take the piece, I begin to squeeze up the head.
What an expression! It sounds like your local Thriller.
Squeeze
I
up the head.
Squeeze up
That's
the
right.
head.
That's right. And begin to, which this one still needs. It needs to be hollowed out as far as I can in the inside, and I'll take that or other pieces and add those, build those up for the arms, build that in for the plate that's going to be the candle holder, and just kind of develop the shape and the form for this particular one. These are Advent figures. They each
Right.
share the expression of some aspect of that season.
And of course, now our finished product then comes
Right,
to this.
these are our finished products, and they simply have a little bit of slip, which is nothing more than the same color clay, wet, very thin, painted on. I use a paintbrush and I just splash it on, and then they're fired again very slowly because they're thick. They're intended to be really heavy pieces so that they don't wobble around on a tabletop, and they're fired and they're ready to go.
You were saying these are commission pieces, and when we were laughing before about the monks.
Yes, 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 yes.
I'll take 200 monks.
That's right, yes. Well, I don't have commissions for 200. I think I would find an alternate mode if I had 200 to do. But I do have several sets that I have orders for. So
Now the last piece that we
Yes.
have here is a rondo.
yes,
Now I read where you said you started with an eye of, I'm trying to think of,
often something realistic.
realistic that
Yes.
resembles something else.
Yeah,
that
something
they would,
that-
identifiable is the word I'm looking for, identifiable.
That's it.
So you started here and then you add.
That's right. And not to disagree, but sometimes I'll actually, if I don't have the concept for the center, I'll begin and then let that evolve. And I honestly, I think that may be how this one evolved.
Well, you'll have to smack the writer that wrote that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oftentimes that does happen, but the other happens, as I've been moving through with these, the other happens an equal number of times.
And then you add.
That's right. And basically what is added are repeated impressions of simple objects around the studio. I'll take the back of this, for instance, and repeat it as a shape. I've got a whole box of stray things. Friends bring me stray things. Oh, this would be a nice shape, Linda. Oh, or old letters from antique stores, fancy letters. I get those for Christmas presents. So those kinds of things are repeated. They're repeated so that the shapes they make together create interesting other shapes. And many times it's with a sense of some theme, some sense of a concept that's conveyed. A lot of times I'll use things that are very strongly attached to me, like I see in this, I have pieces of the tiara that I wore to my senior prom. I've got little trinkety things like that now I use for those impressions. And then often the words or the letters have something to do with the piece. Like in this, I call the piece 4 Green Trees and Some Flowers. And up in these treetop areas, as it were, I've got letters. If you were to really spend time looking, you'd be able to see green trees. Green trees, green trees, green trees. But impressed in such a way that it really gives the impression of leaves and a sense of the leafiness. So that's the way the initial piece is made. Then, because it's the larger ones need to be cut up. They need to be made into smaller pieces, glazed, then fired, then put back together.
I see, because this is on like fiberboard in the back.
Yes.
Plywood?
No, this is the
Fiberglass?
actual clay.
Oh, it's the clay.
Oh, that's the clay.
For some reason, when I hit it, I thought it was
Yes.
some kind of wood.
No, no, no. That's the clay itself.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating.
And it's the color then that I'm really interested in, and oftentimes I will do multiple firings in order to get because I'll do layers and overlayers and multiple different kinds of clay glazes to get the kind of color that I want with them.
If you had to give, say, a 5 or 6 word sentence describing your work, how would you describe it? I put you on the spot.
Yes,
I know.
but I've written enough about my work that I can probably come up with something. The work is, I do ceramic sculpture that is highly textured, often pierced. The piercings generally relate to a sense of the spiritual, and attempt to create an environment that is both beautiful and relates the viewer to him or herself.
That's more than 6 words.
I know. I lost count there in the middle. At any rate, that's sort of it.
But if you had to shorten it,
If I had to shorten it,
what would you
okay.
say?
It's ceramic sculpture that tries to connect a person to him or herself.
I like that. Well, folks, that's about it. It's been a wonderful morning for me. I hope all of you enjoyed it as much as I did and learned as much as I did. And if you would like to know more about Linda and her work, she does have a website which will be scrolled across the bottom of the picture, and you can get in touch with her yourself. My thanks to Linda and her husband and Willie the dog for their hospitality. And don't forget, I'll see you all next month. In the meantime,